All right, good morning, 8:12. How much screen time is too much? This is a conversation that all parents will be having with themselves daily. And then, why is eating raw cookie dough so risky? Here to break down two major health stories for us today, Dr. Richard Chaffoo. Dr. Chaffoo, good morning, and thank you for being here.
Shally, good to be here.
We'll get to the screen time because there's an argument in my house over this screen time right now and getting it under control.
There is in mine too, the same.
Let's talk about the cookie dough first.
Sure.
We obviously, I think about this every time when we start eating the cookie dough. There's raw egg.
Yes.
That's a concern.
Correct.
But now there's another ingredient that's a concern.
Exactly, Shally. So flour, raw flour is another ingredient, and we found actually that E. coli, you know, we all know we get flour from grain which grows in fields,
right.
And animals go through the fields. It doesn't take much imagination to see how that can get contaminated. And so eating raw cookie dough, the CDC has told us, and the USDA has said the same thing. The problem with that is you can get infections from E. coli and salmonella. So those are two very serious food poisoning organisms that people get.
Obviously, when you think about it, I'm trying to think of any recipes where you just kind of make the flour and you don't cook it and heat it. But a lot of times when you use the eggs and the flour, you're heating them, which kills the bacteria off, right?
Exactly. But you have to remember that, you know, if you're even handling flour or handling raw eggs, you really do need to wash your hands in warm water and soap. And don't let your kids play with the raw cookie dough or the cake batter because, again, it's easy for a child to put their hands in their mouth and potentially get a contamination in that.
Let's say you get that contamination. What are some of the symptoms that?
Well, the symptoms would be primarily GI.
Okay.
You get vomiting, nausea, diarrhea, stomach aches. You can get a fever. So those are all symptoms of potential infection.
Does the same apply in that delicious cookie dough ice cream where they have
Fortunately not. No, that's already been processed.
Okay.
Now, if you take the raw cookie dough or the raw cake batter and make your own ice cream or make your own milkshake,
right.
then of course it's not safe.
It's the raw stuff that's the problem.
It's the raw stuff's the problem.
All right, let's turn to this. Let's have a good conversation about this. There's a new study. It talks about how much screen time kids should have.
Yes. So
how much is too much? It's impossible.
It's impossible, and in fact, you know, what's fascinating is that we do know as parents that kids are using these devices, and it's intuitive they're using them too much. And in fact, studies have come out showing that in kids that were using devices for 2 hours or longer, they actually performed not as well in standardized tests for both language development and for learning. So we know there's an effect. Certainly in toddlers, we've seen definitive evidence that toddlers that use these devices tend to have a harder time giving those devices up. And it's because of the app on the device. Engineers have devised these to maintain your attention span, to essentially addict you to the device. And it's intentional. So the apps that our kids are using, the younger child, it's a more engaging experience for a toddler than it is even for a teenager.
When my children were young, I was one of those parents that said, I'm never going to let them use the iPad or never going to let them use that. Right. And then I just needed 5 minutes of peace and quiet.
And
I'm like,
exactly.
But the reality is, this is the world that we live in. We are surrounded by computers and monitors.
Absolutely.
And my son learned his colors and a lot of his ABCs by doing this.
Yes, and so there is you make a great point, Shally. There is value in learning. But the researchers looked at this in toddlers, and they found that when these children were using these devices in toddlers, that what they learned two-dimensionally did not necessarily translate into the three-dimensional world. So for example, if they were using an app and they were looking at building blocks or Legos, and then they took the child off the device and gave the child the Legos or the building blocks, they had to start all over again. So you're not necessarily learning the three-dimensional world on a two-dimensional device. That's very important. And the American Academy of Pediatrics has come out and say, you know, before 18 to 24 months of age, kids, except for video chatting with a family or friend, you know, family member, should not be utilized at all. Laps are better than apps, is their point.
Yeah, I mean, when it really comes down to it, it's how much you're engaging with the kids, and sometimes it's worrisome to see how much they're. So the recommendation that is out, and based on the research that we know, and I know what you're going to say, but let's turn that into reality for parents today when we are tired and we are wiped out and we need a minute. What is a safe amount of time?
So it's safe, a short period of time, but again, it's with monitoring. So probably less than 2 hours a day if possible.
Okay.
It's harder, you know, I've got twin teenage girls that are
Yes.
16 that seem to be addicted to social media. And a fascinating study that came out of UCSD looked at that specific issue of teenagers with these social media devices and found that it stimulates a part of the brain that creates dopamine. Dopamine is a very powerful neurotransmitter that's responsible for our sense of elation, well-being, and craving. And so there's some neurochemical process that's going on as to why my teenage daughter every 30 seconds picks up her phone and looks at it. There may be some sort of a feedback going on. And also an amazing study out of University of Pennsylvania looked at college students. They found that those kids that were limited to 30 minutes a day or less had less of an incidence of feeling isolated or depressed. So there's definitely evidence that these devices can cause psychological problems when used in excess.
Parents, think about that today and make the decision that's right for your family. Dr. Chaffoo, thank you for being here.
Good to be here.
818, Raul.